After saving the Gorons from the never-ending winter, Link turns himself to Great Bay, where the waters have become murky and the pirates there more daring in their attacks on the Zora. After finding the mortally wounded Macau, Link puts his spirit to rest and must honor his dying wish to rescue Lulu's eggs. After doing what is my personal least favorite side quest in the game, seriously, all my homies hate Pinnacle Rock. He sets his sights on the origin of Great Bay's issues, the temple. But just what is Great Bay Temple? What purpose does it serve? And how does the music there affect the player's experience? It turns out, a whole lot. And today I present to you what makes Great Bay Temple's music so uncomfortable. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. Much like how I pointed out that Snowhead Temple's design exists in stark contrast with the rest of the structures we see for the Goron tribe in Termina, Great Bay's interior is like nothing else in the entire game. It's probably the most advanced piece of technology that we see in the N64 Zelda games. In fact, the only things in the entire franchise that can match its scale are probably the Lanayru Desert Civilization in Skyward Sword and the Guardians in Breath of the Wild. However, unlike Snowhead, the Zora people openly acknowledge that it serves a purpose, mentioning that the temple actually has a guardian, Lulu. In fact, one of the Zora mentions that if something bad happens to the temple, then the Guardian will also suffer misfortune. And seeing as Lulu has lost her children, her voice, and her implied lover, Macau, I'd say she's having a pretty bad day. It's mentioned from multiple sources that the oceans of Great Bay have been tainted recently, with both the murky waters that cloud the ocean and rising temperatures which have made it harder for the local fishermen and even the Zora to find fish, which is certainly due to the corrupting influence of the Skull Kid and Majora. An interesting implication is that Lulu is one of many in a line of guardians for the temple, so it's clearly been around for a long time. I purport the theory that its primary function is to serve as a water purification plant, keeping the Great Bay an idyllic locale for the Zora people. So much so that one of the Zoras mentioned how accustomed they've all become to their peaceful and easy lives there, and how Macau is the only one who can go and fight. Anyways, the temple interior is definitely in a state of disrepair. We can constantly see and hear dripping water leaking through all the metal sheeting that makes up the walls. Whether this is only due to the recent storm that kicked up to prevent people from getting to the temple, or if it's always been this way, is impossible to say. But if the metal used in the sheeting wasn't properly treated, rust like this could start forming very quickly. It's also interesting that we can see the riveting on the metal plating. Riveting still remains a common way to seal metal tanks, and we can see here that no welding has been done. And considering this was a more modern practice in even our world, this makes sense. I'm sure they had Anju the Riveter on the job. It should be noted that the place is much cleaner in the 3DS Remake, with more embellishments of aquatic life on just about every structure. And hey, while we're talking about the 3DS Remake, let's once again mention the lighting. It feels like Grezzo are the kind of people who always crank up the settings to max when starting a new game, because there are a few times when I was swimming that I legitimately had to squint due to how bright my screen got.
It's not possible! No one's ever been able to call him...
Exodia! Obliterate!
Anyways, going with the water purification theory, we can see in the mini-boss rooms what appears to be some super unclean sludge flowing in through the grates on the walls. I actually did some research on water purification plants and how they work, and basically one of the many steps to purifying water for consumption is to coagulate bigger particles and sediments so they are easy to remove. And the two mini-boss rooms seem perfect for situations like this. Considering how thick and dark the liquid flowing in seems, and the rooms not being full of water which creates an arena for Link to fight in, could be a sign that they aren't serving their intended purpose. Also, in another room we have several pipes coming in and out of this big structure, which could be the dungeon's actual filtration tanks. Essentially, the next step is to get rid of any finer particles and bacteria the previous step might have missed. This is almost always done through sand filtration, in which the water is pressed through increasingly finer layers of sand. In fact, we see this water flowing upwards in the tank, which is how most water purification engineers in the real world recommend doing it. However, before Link is able to rotate the switch on top, the water isn't flowing at all. In fact, there are several of these throughout the temple. It appears that in the process of getting to the dungeon's boss, Georg, you actually have to restart the water purification process. And it's small, but one more thing that I think lends credence to the water purification theory is the ledges on many platforms, which are highlighted with these orange and yellow stripes. Stripes like this, particularly yellow ones, are used in so many cultures as a sign of caution, and many of them are featured at factories with heavy machinery, so it's likely that they're being used here to warn someone of the ledge. After Link clears the temple, some of the Zora mention that the water is returning to normal, and that shortly they expect the sea life to as well. And one final note, as a kid, the doors in this temple always made me think of the backgrounds on the Death Star. Did anybody else feel this way? But enough about the design of Great Bay Temple. Let's get into talking about the music, because this might be the most clever song I've covered so far. And I don't mean that as hyperbole, it's seriously amazing. Kondo really kicked it into high gear on this one. Also, a real quick shout out to Laura and Trabia for making the sheet music I use in this video, and to Colin of Bad News Botanists and Run On Music for their help as music theory consultants. And I've included a link to all of these people in the description down below. First off, we get this striking percussion to start the song and set the rhythm. This really helps solidify the mechanical nature of the temple right off the bat. Honestly, I wouldn't place this sound as a specific drum per se, but more as someone banging on oil cans, like Stomp was doing a set in the other room or something. Either way, it's the first thing you hear as you ride in on the turtle, apart from the dripping water leaking through all the metal, and it really hammers home the industrial nature of the dungeon. Next, we hear another percussion sound, and this is the ringing of metal on metal. Almost factory-like, nailing home the machine-like nature we got from the first sound, and echoing the visuals of the dungeon. This clanging comes in after the third repeat of the former drum phrase, to surprise the player and throw off their expectations for the song that they had already established. Again, as I've mentioned in previous videos, by setting up a melody or rhythm, the listener's ear begins to fall into a comfortable place. By then throwing that off, we subconsciously get uncomfortable, and have to reevaluate what to expect. Add on to this the fact that this is a literal loud clang, and yeah, I'd say it throws the listener for a loop. But get this, the first time we hear it, it's after 3 loops of the first drum rhythm. But going forward, it repeats after every 2 loops. So our ears subconsciously go, okay, this loud clang happens after every 3 measures. And then Kondo pulls a fast one, and suddenly we get surprised by it a second time. On top of this, we get another rhythm thrown in with this sort of electronic sound. There's no real pitch to this, and it just serves to throw off our understanding of the rhythm of the song even more. It comes in after the 4th measure, after the first metal clang, and then plays in tandem with the oil can drums. Amazingly, this plays for a whole 12 measures, or roughly half a minute of the song, before it suddenly stops. Once again, Kondo has played us like an ocarina, getting us used to a sound so when he cuts it off, even though the rest of the instruments keep playing, the silence of this one is deafening. Finally, in the 7th measure, Kondo gives us something with a pitch to latch onto. Is it comfortable? No. This isn't necessarily an instrument in the traditional sense like I've covered in previous videos, but what's more interesting is how it's used. This section is just 3 descending notes played over and over. Now, the song is in 4/4 time. Usually, this means the listener is in for a fairly simple, easy to understand rhythm. But because this is 3 notes, an odd number, repeated over and over, it doesn't fit perfectly into a 4/4 measure, which creates the impression that the meter is different from the actual time signature. In this case, it can create the feeling that the song is actually speeding up. After the first measure, we start the second measure on the second note of this 3-note segment. And on the third measure, we start on the third note. This 3-note section flies in the face of the rhythm set up by the percussion. But it's just enough that it's not screaming in your face. Since they are 16th notes, you probably don't even notice that it's off-tempo. All the while, Kondo fades this section in and out, leaving the player feeling more confused. In addition to this descending 3-note segment, Kondo then introduces an ascending 5-note segment. Again, it's ugly. And what's wild is that because it's another odd number of 16th notes, they also don't fit within the 4/4 rhythm established. And Kondo introduces this 5-note section on top of the 3-note section. All the while, both are fading in and out. At one moment, the dominant sound is the 3-note section, and at another, the dominant sound is the 5-note section. It's absolute madness. This technique is known as rhythmic phrasing, where you have 2 different related parts of different lengths that go in and out of sync with each other. And while this section is going on, Kondo drops out the drums and the synth rhythm, so all we are left with is just the 3 and 5-note segments. And I'd like to draw a comparison between these last 2 parts and how they mirror Link's traversal of the dungeon. The central hub for the temple features a giant spinning vortex, in which you are forced to swim with the current to go to various rooms in order to advance. Halfway through, however, you manage to reverse this vortex, allowing Link to visit other rooms you couldn't before. The 3-note segment is descending, the 5-note segment is ascending. Kondo has stated before that he plays a section of a game over and over to get a sense of how it plays before writing the music. And the man is a genius, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is what he was going for. Kondo then drops out the 5-note segment, and with just the 3-note segment repeating while fading in and out, he actually gives us a pretty chord. In fact, this is an A major chord. Going off this, combined with the fact that the 3-note segment has both a C sharp, or a D flat on the sheet music, and an A in it, you might be fooled into thinking that this whole piece is actually in the key of A major. But ha ha ha, Kondo tricks you again. In the key of A major, we would normally see this followed up by a B minor chord. But here he raises all the notes by the same interval, which gives us a B major chord. Next, he jumps it up to a D major, which is found in the key of A major, before dropping it back to a D flat major chord, which in the key of A major would normally be a C sharp minor chord. All of these actually function on the whole tone scale, which is a scale made entirely from whole step notes. Remember how I mentioned last time that Kondo loves to use tritones to make stuff uncomfortable? Well, the whole note scale is all tritones all the time. And it's usually used in things like dream sequences in old television shows. The whole tone scale is naturally unsettled, and I think there's correlation between this and how half of the temple features Link leaving solid ground, being forced to go with the flow of water. And finally, to finish the song out just before it loops around to the start, we get some even weirder synthy sounds with an echo effect on them. This is just 2 notes, repeated with a faster speed the second time. Similar to how Kondo was throwing in more sounds seemingly at random towards the end of the Snowhead Temple theme, here he is again putting in more sounds that, while fitting with the theme, come out of nowhere and surprise our ears with something we haven't heard before. And because it only repeats twice, we don't have time to get used to it before it's gone. Legitimately, I didn't remember hearing this sound at all during my previous playthroughs, so to hear it towards the end while listening back to this song was really surprising. Kondo pulled out all the stops when writing the uncomfortable music of Great Bay Temple, a place that many players dislike even more because they got lost in the underwater labyrinths and had to reset time just to finish it. But while Great Bay is certainly one of the most infamously disliked dungeons in the entire franchise, I hope this video has at least made you appreciate the lengths that the team who designed it went through to make it so much fun to hate. Thank you very much for watching this video on Great Bay Temple. If you've been enjoying our Zelda Dungeon Analysis Series, please give this video a comment and even like down below because it really helps us out a lot. And if you want to chat with us and other people enthusiastic about the Zelda franchise, consider heading over to our Discord, where we have a whole channel for discussion theories. And if you have a few bucks to toss our way, we'd really appreciate it if you checked out our Patreon. Our content will always stay free, but any support is always appreciated. Either way, until next time, have a wonderful day.